Hello, friends. Welcome to the Great Awakening Generator. I am Rose McNair, and today we have the honor of having with us the wonderful Cara Daniels from Deep Root Connections. Hello, Cara. I'm so tempted to say Cara because, having the British background in my English. Hello, Cara. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have a chat with you.
You're so welcome. And you know what? I'm so excited to have a chat with you. I've been looking forward to this in anticipation because I found out about you through my daughter who follows you on Instagram. And she said, "You've got to get her, Mum." And I thought, okay, we'll try. I don't know if she'll come, but we'll try. And I'm so glad you were open to saying yes and to having this chat with me because from listening to the podcasts on your website and that, I just know that this is an area in this time and space that is coming to the forefront. The work that, well, I call it work, you might call it something else, but what you're doing, your communications with other beings, I'll call them beings, you'll tell us more later, um, is so necessary because we need to realize that animals, plant life, the planet, there's a lot on the other creatures and life on the planet that has equal value as us humans. So, I'm so glad you're here. Right, Cara, tell us, what is it that you call yourself?
Yeah, that's such a complicated question. I actually hate it when people ask me that. What is your
Sorry.
title? What? No, 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 it's perfect because I actually like to talk about why I don't have a label.
Yes.
One, because it's complicated. How do you categorize something that's hard to explain, anyways? And I feel like I'm still kind of in an evolving state of being. And so I don't want to put myself into a label or a box where it's like, well, I might shift out of that at any moment. So
Yes.
so I kind of just call myself an interspecies communicator and land healer, but I also work with so many different other energies and do energy healing. So we'll just go with interspecies communicator for today.
Right. Interspecies communicator. I've
Yeah.
not heard that one before. And I
Mhm.
really love it. And I agree with you because things are changing every day, right? Sometimes in a day, you can have five different thoughts about things outside of what you're currently doing. And it almost feels like, even though you're doing what you're doing, but there's some times you feel you're being guided to something else. And we have to go with the flow of whatever that is. If you're listening to your guidance, then it's just going to be fluid all the time. And you're just going to flow. So really love that. So what is an interspecies communicator?
Yes. So in the most plain sense, it's the ability to communicate from one being to another, so myself to an animal. And most people in my kind of world call themselves animal communicators. However, I find that to be limiting. And that's why I choose interspecies communicator, because not only can I communicate with animals, I can communicate with plants and trees and the consciousness of the land. And so it's definitely multi-layered and multidimensional in that regard.
Yeah, I was quite fascinated with the idea of you communicating with trees because that was like zap me. I was like, whoa. And I'm just writing a note for myself that I don't forget to ask you about this one thing that you talked about that we are not talking about now, but I will talk about it. I will ask a question if you don't. Anyway, if you don't tell us, I'll ask the question. So I was just fascinated with the trees because I thought, wow, trees like, because there's been times when I've walked past a tree and I've felt, because I walk the dog a lot and we go through, to different places, and I just feel like it calling me back. I feel this energy as I walk past this tree, like it's saying, "Oh, you're just gonna walk past," you know. So I was so fascinated with that. So there's the trees that you communicate with. There's animals that you communicate with, and there's elementals. I understand
Mhm.
because you were talking. One of the podcasts I listened to, you were talking about communicating with elementals. Like every garden has a gnome and something like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to find the gnome in my garden, And Cara, I've got to tell you about that. I actually have had a change in the energy in after listening to you and just starting to communicate with whatever's in the garden. I've actually had a change of energy in the garden. I started to hear things to bring, like bring plants that are not in the garden into the garden that were sitting in the back garden or whatever. So thank you for that. But okay, so there's that. And then you're talking about communicating with the land and with Gaia. So can we go through the let's talk about animal communication first, right?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, tell us about the animal communication. Like, when did you start doing it? How do you do it? How do you know you're doing it?
Yeah, I think that's actually the best place to start because it's a little bit more approachable and understandable because, our animals have brains, whereas trees don't necessarily, quote unquote. But animal communication, really, to just kind of define it, is a two-way conversation, two-way energetic exchange between human and animal or two beings. And through that energetic exchange, messages get received in a lot of different senses. So a lot of people call them their clairs or their psychic senses. So it's like your inner seeing, your inner hearing, your inner knowing, and all of those. So that's how animals communicate. That's how trees communicate. That's how everything communicates. It is really truly just decoding the decoding the energy that's coming to you in a way that will make sense for the receiver or the person or the communicator. So that's just kind of a little bit of background on how it works and what it is.
Yeah,
And as far as when it started for me, I've always been kind of an intuitive kid. When I was little, I was kind of that one kid with bare feet, playing with the butterflies and twirling around with the wind. I mean, that was
yeah,
just me.
yeah.
And then as I aged, I kind of turned that off and turned away from it. But through a series of events, I took a path that was very heavy in the sciences, wildlife conservation, and I got stuck. I wanted to do something useful with my life. I had such a strong mission, but I didn't know how to channel that energy. And I thought that was the right path for me. And I just like every time I took a step forward, it's like I got blocked. I just couldn't make it work. So I took a step back and I said, what am I supposed to be doing on this planet? Like, I know I'm supposed to be doing something. Somebody help me figure out what that is. And the moment I kind of surrendered to a new kind of idea, my coworker brought me a stray cat that just kind of showed up on his property. And he says, I can't keep her. Just help me do something with this cat. And I said, of course, bring her here. I'll take her. I'll figure out what to do with her. Well, she ended up being pregnant and I couldn't keep her. So I was kind of in a weird situation where I was like, I can't keep this cat, but she's pregnant. So what do I do? And so I put her in this really lovely insulated shed. I know it sounds bad, but I put her in the shed and I kept her for a while so she could have her kittens. And during that time, I think it was about 3 months.
Hmm.
So I had her longer than I anticipated, but I was just sitting with her one day after she had her kittens. And I thought, I still haven't named you. That's so weird because normally I come up with names for animals so quickly, but for her, it's like every time I try to think of a name, nothing would come into my mind. And so one day I was with her and her kittens, and I was just sitting there thinking, "What is your name?" And her eyes almost just like shot through my soul. It's like that really intense cat stare. And it actually caught my attention because I was like, "That's really intense. Why are you staring at me like that?"
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
immediately I heard Samantha in her
Oh,
voice. And then I also heard a bunch of little tiny voices chirping in the background, which were all of the little kittens saying their
yeah.
names too. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just talked to a cat. How did I do that? And then, so of course, I was like, how do I do that again? And that kind of took my journey forward on how do I learn animal communication. So that's kind of how it all started for me, and I never looked back.
Yeah, yeah. They are wonders, aren't they, animals? Because they just have uh, well, I know my dog, for example, I know his signs of like if he's feeling a bit embarrassed or he needs my help, like if he's got a thistle stuck in his coat and he needs my help, and he just looks up at me and he's got these eyes that say, "Help, please," I can read that. But that's because I spend so much time with him. It's not something you're just gonna get. It's more because he's become my family, and he lives with me every day, and I we know how to communicate. But coming in and communicating with a pair with an animal that's not yours and just doing it off the bat or understanding what's going on with them, that's a whole different level altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really interesting topic to dive into. So, with our own pets, with our own animals, I think that we overlook that we're already communicating with them because we know them so well. It's not like a direct conversation or moment like I had with that cat.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it's like even with my animals, it's more of just like a fluid connection. I just kind of intuitively feel and know what they need. And so
mm,
many animal guardians feel that exact same thing. So it's
yeah,
like they every time they hire me, they're like, "Oh, I already knew that." I'm like, "Yeah, I know you did because you're already communicating with your animal. You just don't know it." So
yeah,
I just think that's always cool to kind of point out. But
yeah.
communicating with animals that I have never met before is actually easier for me because I can feel their energy a lot more prominently than I do with my own animals, for example, because it's like meeting somebody new. You're just getting to know their energy, their personality. And so it's like they come through a lot stronger.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a lot more it's easier to have these conversations because I'm not biased. I don't know anything about them. So it's a lot easier to trust what's coming through.
Yeah, that's a good point you make there. Wow. So I was going to ask, and I've decided now that I'll ask all of this next question. I'm going to ask it at the end of everything, end of everything in terms of you telling us how you work with the different aspects, right? So anything else you want to tell us about the animals before we move on to the next one?
Sure. I would just say for people that want to try to start communicating with their own animals, start using pictures in your mind and just send your animals pictures. Like, don't get on the couch, for example. Like, if you don't want them up on the couch, send them a picture of them with their feet on the ground and just see what happens. See if you can kind of help just have that conversation with them and then see if you can receive anything back within the image space within that third eye. It's a fun way to kind of start opening that space.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? That's good advice. That's a good tip if you want to communicate with your I'm going to try that with Baxter and see what happens. He's quite headstrong. So, we do butt heads a lot sometimes. But, it's yeah, such a good relationship, getting better. It's quite a transformative one that I have with my dog. Um, right. So, let's talk about the trees. That's like my hot topic. I just like, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with the idea of this. I'm so in love that anyone's doing this. How do you know that you can talk to trees? I mean, I talked about energy now, but like, I mean, you probably, they say hug a tree and all, and you'll feel better and all of that. And I have my cherry tree outside there that I do that with. And it's so magical under the cherry tree for whatever reason. That's our elemental spot, I think. But tell me about your how you started, how you knew. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it actually kind of goes in layers. So, because I had started communicating with animals, I got really comfortable understanding how messages came in for me and deciphering what was mine and what was coming from an external source. And so, because I had that background, when I started opening up to trees,
Yeah.
I could trust that so much more. But it took a while and it really was out of a necessity. So, I had been working in the professional field as an animal communicator for about a year. And I got to that point of being really comfortable, but also feeling like there was something more that I was supposed to be doing. I just had no direction or no idea what it was. And so I asked the animals, I was like, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? What's my next step? And they basically told me, well, go into the trees and find out. Go find a tree to talk to. I
Wow.
was like, what? I had heard of people who could communicate with plants. So that wasn't really a new concept. But that to me was even a little bit more of a jump. I was like, I
Yeah.
don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
So I took myself on a walk and I said, okay, like if there's a tree out here that wants to talk to me, I guess let me know. I mean, I didn't have any idea of what to expect. So I started my walk and immediately, kind of what you said earlier with that tree kind of calling you in, that's exactly what I felt. It was like a magnetic pull and I was gonna ignore it. I was like, "No, I got this whole hike planned." And then I took 2 more steps, and then I was like, "No, I have to go like be with that tree right now." This magnetic pull was so strong I could not ignore it. And so I go over to this tree And I sit down and I thought, now what do I do? How do you talk to a tree? So I took the same approach that I use with animal communication. I just sat down, I got really quiet, and I set my intention to say hi to this tree. And it was instant. I heard this tree's voice just like I do with the animals, very unique. And I could feel his energy and his essence. He felt like a grandfather tree, and he was so wise and just so happy that somebody actually picked up on his
Wow.
energy and sat down with him. And so there was a moment where I'm just like crying because he's like so touched that I'm there. And I thought, oh my gosh, trees really do communicate with us. And why is nobody talking about this? I literally ran home and Googled tree communication and I couldn't find anything. I'm like, can trees talk to us? What does this look like? And so I did so much research or tried to, but I couldn't find anything.
Mm.
And so that was kind of my motivation to start talking about it, to see if there was like anybody else out there doing it, which there
Yeah.
are tons of people.
Yes.
But that's kind of how it started for me, is once I opened up that gateway with this particular tree, I started just playing around with it. I was like, well, do all trees talk? And so I just started seeing who would talk to me and what they had to say. And then it just like became this whole thing. I absolutely would never turn away from the trees at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, there are people talking to trees and talking about talking to trees. They just don't seem to come. There's not as many. I mean, even in my space, the only other person I know of that speaks of trees is Tim Wilde, and he's an intuitive. He's from the south of England, and I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's an intuitive teacher. I'm calling him an intuitive teacher. There's so many titles. There's so many things he does anyway. However, he talks about trees, and he was talking like when he does some of his meditations, he walks through the woods in England, and he there's one tree that he sits next to, and he talks about that tree, and it looks like it has a face behind, like the face is looking into the camera. And it's wow, it's such an amazing thing that that trees can talk, and that we have taken them for granted, and that, oh, we can chop you down, we can do whatever, or we can just ignore you standing there for hundreds of years and carry on with our lives. And I just find, like, the Lord of the Rings, the second one, I think it was the Two Towers, that the trees came to life there, and they showed us something of the trees. And that for me, like, was like, this is what we needed to see, right?
Mhm.
So, when you speak with trees, and I dare ask, now that I brought the Lord of the Rings into it, um, they speak Intage, according to that movie. Do you have anything to say about Intage? Do you know anything about it?
I really don't. I really know nothing. I love Lord of the Rings, but I've never gone in that rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, because it's like, okay, Intage, wow, they refer to as the Ents, I think, and they're speaking Intage. So it's kind of very like a specific species of humans that speak, like, the French speak French, for example.
Mhm.
Um, So I just thought that was quite fascinating. And Tim Wilde talks about how the trees of the world communicate. Their root system, they're all connected, and they can communicate with trees. Like, the time that he talked about this, one of the podcasts, he was actually, I think he was um, in Germany somewhere, and he had talked to his tree in his garden before he went, and the tree had said that it would communicate with those trees there. And then it also said those trees were going to be communicating with trees across all over the world, including as far as Australia and New Zealand from where it was. And I thought, wow, you know, we don't realize what's all around us.
Yeah, yes, they do. They do communicate all around the world. I've actually kind of experimented with that. I have some
Okay.
friends located around the world, and I'm like, I'm going to tell this tree this. Let me know what your tree says I said. It's like that telephone game with like the string and the cups.
Wow.
And they're getting the same information, and it's so interesting. And I actually had somebody the other day that was interviewing me for a different podcast, and she said, yeah, the tree said to say hi. And I was like, okay. So they do
Wow.
communicate. There's like a collective consciousness within the trees,
Yeah.
and they share information. It's very cool.
Yeah. Before you go, I would like to show you a picture. I'll share it on my screen with you, and I must just remember that because I might forget. But if I do, please, I put in my notes here. But please remind me. I want to show you this really beautiful picture from one of my Oracle card decks. Anyway, wow, trees. Anything more you want to tell us about trees? I think it's such a vast topic, but
Yeah, I could talk about them all day, every day. I would just say, yeah, don't underestimate the power of a tree. They want to be acknowledged, they want to be seen, but mostly they just want to be respected. And that's really the underlying message that I want to get through is that they are conscious beings. They
yeah,
know what's going on and it's time that we kind of look at them in a new way and just
yeah,
respect them even if we have to use them.
yeah, yeah. That's the thing. Honor to the tree, right?
Mhm.
Honor to this thing that you have to use. Yeah, we have to. If we have to use it, then yes. But how do we treat it? And
Okay.
how and do we get rid of all of it and don't replace it, or just that kind of thinking that we need to start to reassess how we think and how we take action in terms of thinking or use of the tree. There's nothing quite beautiful as a tree in the garden, or the one that you can sit under and appreciate the shade and the breeze and the coolness and the peace of it, right? That's how I feel about that. It's just, yeah, I can feel myself in the garden now. So let's talk about, so we were talking about that. I want to talk about the elementals.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think most children, I'll say most children in the Western world, because I don't know about children in the East, in the East, what they were growing up with. But most children in the Western world, we've read books on with fairies in it, with elves and gnomes and the naughty goblins and whatever. Um, so we have grown up with that, and we have this magicalness as we're growing up because we read the stories, and then we sort of, when you're playing outside or whatever, you can feel the energy of all of that. And then as we get older, we lose that. But I have recently met a few people that are really telling me about how they communicate. Now, I met the first person who told me about the fairies, and that she was connecting with the fairies with somebody I met in 2020. And she was an American lady also, and uh, and she showed me some pictures of her garden where she was taking some pictures, and there were the fairies flying around and having a good time. She also had a video with this, and you could almost hear the woo woo, like that kind of thing. So tell us about your experience with the elementals. I'm going to say elementals because I'm not going to just say it's only fairies, because I don't think it's only fairies that we are
Yeah,
communicating.
sure. So I work with a few individuals. I guess I work with a few individuals. So I work with a specific for not a forest fairy, a garden fairy, a garden gnome, and then there's the Pegasus and unicorns and other kind of beings, but they're a little bit more celestial.
Yes,
So we'll
yes.
just kind of stay with the fairies for now.
Okay.
But
I'll just tell you, on our channel, we do bring in unicorn energy, and we bring in dragon energy, and we bring in, we're open. So that was not weird for us.
that's great. I love the dragons too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like once you open that box, it's like everybody just wants to come in and say hi.
Yeah.
But I do work with the fairies quite often. I actually don't have my own fairies. They tell me I'm not open-hearted enough or
Ah,
light-hearted enough. That's right. I'm not light-hearted enough, I guess. I don't know. So the garden fairies that I communicate with most frequently live in one of my family members' gardens.
oh,
And
wow.
so I get all of my intel from her. So I often do Q&As with her just to kind of get to know the fairy realm a little bit more. Or a lot of times in my animal communication sessions, the dogs and the cats will be like, "Can you tell the fairies to go away? They're obnoxious." Or, "We have two new fairies today. Let me introduce you to them." And so they're constantly around, whether
Okay.
you know it or not, really.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're lovely. They work so beautifully with excuse me, the energetic layers of the land and the plants, and they want to co-create with us in our gardens and be part of our world. So yeah, I'm sure you have fairies in your cherry tree and that whole area.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just like they have such a lighthearted,
Yeah.
sparkly kind of energy. It just makes you kind of want to giggle.
Yeah, exactly. And also, there's a lot of ladybugs on this tree,
Mhm.
like tiny ladybugs, like orange ones and red ones everywhere. And that just speaks to me. Elementals, they're here. Well, there's no question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny too. Like the fairies will send birds or like dragonflies or something like that that'll kind of check the humans out and to see if
Okay.
they're safe. And so if you ever have like that weird kind of unusual interaction with an animal where it's just like, why is this hummingbird looking at me so weird and getting really, really close to me? It's most likely a fairy. Or there's
Okay.
something going on there. They're just checking you out.
Yeah. Wow, that's nice to know. That's nice to know. It helps me understand better the behavior of birds at the garden, and or if one comes and stands out there in front of the window and just looks at me or talks with me, and it's it's interesting, that they do these things. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So fairies. So what can you tell us about? You were talking about how they help us. So you're talking about the garden gnome. I remembered one of your other podcasts for our benefit for our audience. Tell us about, give us a tip about the garden, how we can use the elementals to,
Mhm.
please.
Sure. Yeah. So the intel that I get from the garden fairies is that, okay, first and foremost, like when you go outside in your garden and you're a little extra stressed out or cranky, and as you move through your garden and that energy kind of dissipates and you find that calm, the fairies will take the energy that's kind of coming off of you, what we would consider less than high vibe energy, like that stress. The fairies will essentially collect that energy, compost it, and turn it into something almost like fertilizer for the plants.
Wow,
Yeah, I know.
that's
Who would have ever
amazing.
thought?
No.
They show me that they just kind of manipulate our energy and
Yeah,
because it becomes almost physical in their world and they just
yeah.
compost it and they spread it out. So if you're ever like, oh, I feel bad giving you all of my stress, it's all good. They like it. So that's
Okay.
kind of one way that they work with us. And the second way is just to be cognizant that they're there and ask them for help. So if your tree is not doing very good, or if you're just like, why is this spot in my garden just dying constantly? You can ask the fairies to come in and help you and just say, hey, I don't exactly know what needs to be done, but can you come help? And so that's another
Wow.
way that you can work with them. They also
Mm.
love to do energy healing on animals as a side note.
Wow.
Yeah, I ask the fairies all the time. I bring in fairy energy and use it similar to Reiki, I guess, which is more commonly known. But it's like fairy Reiki in a sense, and you can use the
Okay.
fairies and
Wow.
do energy healing with the animals. So, I mean, really all you have to do is ask.
Wow.
If they're there, can you
Yeah.
help me? If so, how? Let's work together. They do like gifts though. So, if you want to open up that connection, they love honey, they love sparkly things like crystals. Anything like birdseed would be good too, anything that's complementary for the wildlife. But just remember nothing that is inorganic, like plastic, or something
Oh,
that would be
yes.
harmful to the wildlife. So,
Yeah.
but definitely they love gifts.
Wow. Thank you for saying that, because now we know. Because we need to show them we appreciate them, because
Mhm.
they're obviously helping us, even though we may or may not be aware of them, and more of us are unaware of them. So well, I think anyway, and now this is all coming to the forefront, right? um so I think they're helping us, and we don't, well, without in being unaware of it, we're probably not putting something out there that they can appreciate. Do they like our food? Like maybe, if you should put out fruit or berries or something like that, do you think they would, that's a gift?
I definitely would.
Yes, yeah. As long as I guess it's organic, it's not something that's going to be harmful to
Exactly.
the environment. Yeah. Wow. Really amazing guardians of the environment, right? The elemental
Yes,
kingdom.
yes. And that's where you have to be a little careful because if you disrespect the land, they're not going to be terribly happy. So they
Mm.
really should be worked like if you're going to work with the fairies, make sure that you have the best interest of the land in mind.
Yeah, something that's so important, and becoming quite a topic in current times, right? So anything else you want to tell us about the fairies?
I would just say if you're going to connect in with the trees, you're most likely going to connect in with the fairies too, because a
Yeah.
lot of these trees are homes to the Fae. So usually they kind of come together.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I think the magic of the trees is part of the magic of the elementals or the fairies
Mhm.
or whoever's there, right? Such an amazing, such an amazing kingdom. A while back, if I recall, vaguely I recall this, they chose to be invisible to us in this time. They chose to be invisible to us. Whilst with now communicating with unicorns and dragons, I've come to realize, and learning more about them, I've come to realize, well, they're coming to the forefront now. More people are talking about unicorns and dragons because this is their time to come back into our space. But the elementals too, it must be the time for them to come back into our space because we're talking about them. But um, you know, dragons, you'll see them up in the clouds. You'll see in your mind's eye one standing there or something like that. But yeah, fairies, they're communicating, but they're also taking their time to do it. And I feel like they're also you have to be open to that. You have to be believing and knowing that it's there before you can actually see it. So yeah, it will come, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. The power of believing is basically your gateway into connecting with anything. It's like if you don't believe, you automatically block yourself off. So
Yes. Mm,
that
yeah.
is definitely important to remember. But to kind of circle back around with what you were saying, according to ancient history, we did used to live alongside all of these beings. There
Yes.
was once a time, and because humanity chose to go one direction, all of these beings decided to stay in a higher vibration, and that's why we can't physically see them right now. But I do agree with what you're saying. They are working their way back into our consciousness and maybe eventually back into the physical reality, but most likely not in my lifetime. But
Um,
you never know.
yeah, I feel like people like yourself, like
Mhm.
you've been open and you've already like you didn't have to change. Obviously, you've already got this vibration to see them and to feel them because you've been doing this for a long time, right? And you've been communicating with the trees and you've been communicating with the elementals and animals, and you've been doing that as a child. And obviously, as children, we are open to things. We are more open and more receptive to that, receptive, I would say, to seeing these unusual things. The adults sort of downplay it for us because they're in a different space. But that was very important and significant. And I feel like for people like yourself, this was what perhaps is where you're destined to be. You are one of the messengers. You're the gateway to all of that for all of us, right? We'll start to see more because of our processes we're going through now, that ascension process, the transformation process, the fact that people are now talking openly about fifth dimension and or higher dimensions than the third dimension, that we've been in for so long, the physicality of us. So I think for us who have not been communicating as it's our way of life or part of our life, we will see more as we do that part where we are doing the meditation and all of that. And because we're preparing ourselves to become receptive, where you're already receptive, you come being receptive. I hope that made sense. And it's not segregation. It's just saying your work, what you're doing is unique and you're the messenger for it.
Yeah, I follow what you're saying. I just feel like I'm maybe two steps ahead of the rest of the world or the people that are gonna eventually be able to come into
Yes.
this space. And so it's like
Yes.
if I can just pave the way even a little bit for a couple of people, it's totally worth just talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's fulfilling a soul's purpose, isn't it? I think in with how you're working with it. And and this is not about saying anyone's better than the other one. And I say this for the benefit of our audience because we know that we all have a part to play here. And that part to play is multifaceted. It's not just one thing. Because you think about you're doing this communication, but in how many aspects? In a few, and it's probably going to change. And you're doing so many things with it. So before we go to exactly what it is that you do with it, what about communication with the land and with Gaia, with the earth? What is that all about?
Yeah, it's basically the next layer. So you have your elementals, and I always just like to say I work and communicate with the guardians of the landscape. And so very similar to like the dragons and the unicorns, it's like that same layer of energy. Within every landscape has its own guardian. And what that looks like is in that etheric energetic realm, I call them like sisters or brothers to Gaia, essentially, because they are given a space of land to caretake and watch over. And so that's like the overarching guardian, I guess, of the landscape. And then on our way down to more like to people's specific homes or their properties, there's like the trees that are the guardians. There's all of the elementals that we're talking with. There's the spirit of the house itself. So there is a spirit within everybody's homes. And it's not weird. They're just like your guardian, basically. And then there's the land itself, which, if anybody's familiar with like the Akashic records of your soul, which is like your entire history of your actual soul, the land also has an Akashic record. And so what I'm finding that I can do is just tune into that space and see the trauma that is still there. And in order to basically raise Gaia's consciousness, we have to clear all that trauma
Yes.
or lower vibrational energy or beings. And
Yes.
so when I do my land healings, for example, I'm going into those different layers to see what is actually there, what can be removed and healed, and then help the people or the people of the land keep that vibration high and do physical healing. So I help on the energetic field. And then all of these other beings I'm talking about usually have like a to-do list for the physical
Okay.
person that's
Wow.
going to do it. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like I usually come up with a whole to-do list that the guardians want the caretaker to do. And that's usually like working with grids or creating certain boundaries or barriers with crystals or um, even if it's just holding a ceremony. Like I had this one guardian of the landscape, and part of that too is like the reciprocity between people and the land. And so these guardians, these overarching guardians, their energy is really low because so many people forgot that they exist. And
Yeah.
so they're not giving that energy back to the guardians, in that whole equilibrium of give and take. And a lot of the guardians are literally just like, just acknowledge us. Our cup is empty and we cannot give
Wow.
you anything more because of that. And so,
Yeah.
if there's any takeaway today, is just acknowledge that your landscape has an overarching guardian, sorry. And to recognize them will help increase the vibration of your land. And you can just do that by like holding a fire ceremony, creating a grid, saying um, prayers and gratitude into the waterways. Like whatever feels right for you will help exponentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. A lot of people do not acknowledge this and do not respect that this is something that is important because, growing up, my being of Indian descent, my parents, every time they moved into a house, they would do a clearing ceremony before they brought anything into the house, right? And so over time, whenever I moved into a house, I've done the same, not necessarily as intensely as they did, but normally when I clean up the house before, although it might come professionally cleaned, I would still clean. And I always use salt and incense and things like that, and every time that I clean the floors, I will have Epsom salts in it and things like that. This house in particular, and it's interesting we're talking about clearing the land, clearing the house and the land and all of that. This house in particular, we did all of that, and when and we've lived here now, or I've lived here for 3 years, and it was just a house that I felt that as much as I'd done all of that, it didn't come with great vibrations. It's the vibrations of things, because quite often I just hurt myself, just bump into something, just, like just not happy, settled, that kind of thing. And and I'd come from a house I'd lived in for a long time, and it had this amazing energy. It was the energy that aligned when I walked into that house when I saw it the first time. This one was great too, but I just don't know what it was. And then one day, I'd said this to a few times, and one day, just a few months ago, I was sitting in my chair and doing meditation, and I was talking to my guides, and I said, we need to do, I need to go from here because I don't like how I feel. Everything I've done is like not great. And I heard this audible voice say to me, you say every time about how it's not nice here. Are you going to fix me? It's
Mhm.
like, okay, there you go. And I thought, all right, so as much as other people did clearings, I'm supposed to fix you because I have a friend who does clearing. I have a few people, I know a few people, and one of them had done clearing for the property. And she lives in another city and she'd done it virtually, but I was supposed to do it. And I did it. I changed everything. Like I just cleaned. I just, prayed. I lit incense. There's some things that I had to do. I did all of this again. And then you could feel it shift. You could feel the light coming through. And the one day I'd done on the channel, I'd done channeling of the first one was the gold crested dragon, and the other one was a some other dragon that we were invoking the golden light for. And
Mhm.
as I was doing this here, sitting here and recording it, I could feel it going through the house, and that was the clearing that actually the dragon clearing brought this light, cleared everything, the blocks out of it. And then I said, right, we've done it. And then the next thing I heard from it was, well, it's time for you to do the land now. And this land has a history of being a battleground. It has been a burial site, obviously, because it was a battleground. It has all of these ancient native peoples conflict on it, or had it. And then I just in the last months have gone and cleared all the land. And the ceremony we had to do, because I'd seen the ceremony before, I had to light candles all over the garden, all over. And one night I sat outside. I was there like beyond midnight with all these candles lit everywhere. And the candles had Palo Santo in them. And it was just like, wow. So I know that we weren't talking about what you were doing, but I wanted to say that because whoever's listening, if they're going through something like this could be pointer, like, either you do it, they do it, but it's important. And it's important to acknowledge that there are souls here that are waiting to go.
Yes. Oh, I'm so happy you shared that story. The whole time I'm getting full body chills and goosebumps. It's just like your kind of properties, like those are the ones I work with the most because
Yeah.
people move in and they're just like, why am I disoriented? Why am I so cranky? Why am I bumping into things? Like nothing is working here. And it's like, well, because the energy is not right, because there's things there, they're trying to get your attention and it's gonna just amplify until you clear it. And usually, honestly, all of these beings want the people that are actually physically there to do the clearing.
Yeah.
And so that's so cool that you did that and brought that story up. It's just so many properties are just like that. It's like we need to
Yeah.
let all of this go and heal it. And all of the beings there that are stuck. So many souls get
Yeah,
stuck.
yeah, exactly. And I just almost felt forward motion and light and all of that with it. And I say to anybody listening, if you don't know how to do it, of course you can get someone like Kara to help you do it because we're coming into knowingness now. A lot of this is not available to us. A lot of this was stuff that ancient peoples did. And the more we have moved in time, the more we have lost the traditions and the history of what you did when you moved into a house and things like that. I mean, look, I don't know if my daughter does this. She will do the cleansing and clearing because that's there. And I know that she will teach her children, if she has any. But there's so many people that don't know it. And just know that there's help to do that if you don't know how to do that. Like Kara's doing it. So I really love that we are we we are becoming aware that we need to clear the earth of the densities and things that have been here over time. That's probably part of the mission that we are charged with. And I'm trying to not use such intense words, but it's probably one of those things that we need to do here on the planet. And of course, we have people like you that are doing this, that are talking about it, that are bringing it to the forefront, and it's very good. As I was sitting here and you were talking earlier, just maybe before I told my story, I feel I need to say this, and I don't know if this is a little bit forward, but I feel like you're a fairy incarnated into the human. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that
you
makes
are the
sense.
spokesperson. They have sent you here, and they probably had a meeting, a fairy corner meeting or something. I can see it happening because we are these types of people where they were saying we need to be able to, it's time now, and we need to send people out there as to be able to give our message. And this is how we can come out into the forefront and help this planet and help the humanity and the creatures on this planet and the plant life and all of that. And so we need some of you to volunteer to go there. And before you knew it, you put up your hand, before you understood the mission.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I just feel like, just looking at you, I feel that was it. You know, look, sometimes I get these visions and that through our conversations. I do this with people that I talk with, and so I'm sorry if that was a little bit too far forward, but I just I'm just hearing and feeling this because we are, this is us meeting face to face and having this conversation, and that's when you get a better feel with people, right? When you meet them. So in terms of what you do, is there before we carry on with what my next question is going to be, is there anything else that you communicate with that we didn't talk about?
No, I mean, I think we covered most of who and what I talk with. I do connect in with angels. Um, I think that's about the only other space that we didn't touch in on, but they're
Yeah.
not my more dominant guides, I guess. I don't work with them a ton.
Yeah, and angels are always there in an unassuming way, whether we know it or not. They're there before we even know it. Before we even know the word angel or a thing called angels or angels, any of them, they're already there. They just come. They're in the. I've seen them be in the space before we are born, and then as we come into the world, they're there. So and they stay with us, and then they change, and we don't even know that they're changing the garden, and all this happens. So that, sorry, angels, if we look and sound like, if it looks like we are taking you for granted, but I don't know. They are so quiet. They wait for us to ask for help too.
Yes, they
So
do. Although I have to say, so I work with two of them pretty regularly, and I've been working with them for a while, and we have this relationship now where it's like I feel like they're my big brother, for example, and
yeah.
we just kind of banter back and forth. So I think that there's a little bit of misconception with the angels. It's like
Okay.
they're these huge godly beings, but at the same time they're very humanistic. You can roll your
Yeah.
eyes at them and they'll roll their eyes back at you kind of a thing, and it's like it's all good. So once you have
Yeah.
that connection, it's so cool. I
Yeah.
just wanted to share that too. They're not as intimidating as one might think.
No, they're not. And I think the thing is, we think of them as what perhaps religion teaches about angels, right? But I mean, angels come in different forms too. They can come in the form of a human being as well. But those angels that we relate to, they are just so, mine have a sense of humor. They play tricks on me, especially if I'm looking for something and they say, go and look in that cupboard. And I'm like, it's not there. I looked in it and it's not there. And then I'll go everywhere. And we said, look in their cupboard. And then I'm like, are you for real? I just looked there like two times. No, no, look there. And then I open the cupboard, and there it is, that thing I'm looking for. And recently they were playing this trick on me with my glove compartment in the car. And it's like I opened it twice. I couldn't see this. This happened to me 2 days in a row that they were tricking me like that. And actually, it's just me. My mind space is somewhere else. And they're saying, this is where you go and find that. We're telling you, listen to us. You'll find it there. You don't have to run around like that.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool point is to just I used to be so intimidated by them because one, I
Yeah.
didn't believe in them, and
Yeah.
two, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not worthy. And then I opened up that connection and I thought, oh my goodness, this is not nearly as intense as I thought it would be. They're so much more
No,
approachable.
they're
So,
so approachable. And it's
yeah.
really good to know that they're working with us. And the archangels as well. That I have quite interesting conversations with archangels because the like archangels, so it's like, oh, the higher angel. But um we've got some archangels, especially Archangel Metatron, that is really here for transformation process, for this awakening process has come. That there are certain angels that have come, that have been waiting for us to start the awakening, so that we can or so that their service is about that. And I think Archangel Metatron and Sandalphon were prophets of old, and they have incarnated now, and now they are here. Like, if you know anything about, I don't know if you know anything about the Bible, but one of them is meant to be Enoch, who lived 900 and whatever years, and the other one I think is meant to be Elijah, because Elijah had ascended. He hadn't died, he had ascended into the heavens. But anyway, I won't go into that down that road now, because that's another conversation for another time. And anyway, anyone listening, if I've quoted the wrong prophets, I'm sorry. Please feel free to correct me. you know. Anyway, let's talk about what exactly you use all these communications with with interspecies communications. What is the thing that you offer us in terms of the work you do? How do you do your work, and what is that work?
Yeah, I offer a few things. First and foremost, I offer animal communication sessions. So I'll work with a client, and if they want to have a conversation with their current physical animals or those in spirit, I open up that gateway of communication for them.
Okay.
And so that's part one. Part two is the land healing. To me, is kind of my main focus right now because it needs to be done.
Yes.
And so I do work with people one on one to clear their land, help them learn how to do it themselves. Like, I just want to empower people to learn how to do it themselves. And
Great.
so I'll kind of go in, remove some of that icky stuff, and then we work together to make sure that their land is high vibrational and stays that way.
Yeah.
I also do. I also offer every month, every third Saturday of the month, I do free land healing meditations. So it kind of just
Yes.
depends on where the target is every month. It kind of just comes to me. So if anybody's interested in just kind of looking and learning more, that would be a great way to kind of just get used to what I do and how I approach things. And so then the next one will be held on Saturday. Oh, what month are we in? February.
February.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're February. So February 17th is our
Yes.
next one.
Yeah.
And so we're actually going to be working with our own space. So if you're like, my house feels a little weird, this would be a good one for you to come into because we're
Yeah.
going to be targeting everybody's individual location.
Okay. Wow.
And the last thing is, I know I do a lot of things, but the last thing I do is try to teach people how to communicate with all of these different beings. And I start with
Okay.
animal communication, and I have students kind of build their skills and their confidence with animals, and then translate it to trees and working with the landscape. So let's say I'm starting a 9-week program on March 7th to really dive into the world of animal communication. So I'm
Okay.
pretty excited to start that.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad that you told us about that, because I was going to be asking you all about that, and then you've told us. And I like the monthly meditations. I've actually signed up for this. Is going to be my first one, the one that you're having on the 17th of February, and I've got to work out the time difference. I think it's 4 a.m. in the morning for me. So
Oh
it's
my
like,
goodness.
okay.
Well, good thing I
So,
record and send out so you don't actually
okay.
have to be there live.
Great, thank you for that, because I've signed up for it and I thought, oh, let me check the time. It's like 4 a.m. in the morning in New Zealand. So I was like, okay. But um, I have been known to join people at 4 a.m. in the morning, especially in your part of the world. Like, I've done an interview at 4 a.m. in the morning. So it's like, okay, if I'm up that day, I will be there. But thank you that you're sending a recording too, because I was like, okay, that'd be great. Um, so you work obviously face to face, but you do online work as well. I mean, the workshops are online, right?
Yep, pretty much everything I do is virtual and by
Okay,
distance. Yeah.
right. Okay, it's great. So we can be anywhere in the world, and everyone, we can have access to Kara's offerings, and the stuff she's bringing out to the collective. So tell us then where we can find all the information about what you do, please.
Yeah, so I'm mostly in two places. My website is deeprootconnections.com. And then on the social front, I'm more prevalent on Instagram, which is my handle is deep.root.connections.
Okay, wonderful. And we'll put that in the description box too if you missed it, but that's what we will do. And yes, so is there anything else you want to tell us that I haven't asked you about?
I think we covered a ton today.
We did, we did. We try to keep the interviews like 45 minutes to 50 minutes, but this is our first time together. And so naturally that was going to take longer than that time. And it's not too much longer. And I'm loving it that I've loved talking to you and I knew I was going to love talking to you. So there you go. I have, I've asked you about Intage. I have a question before we go. My daughter said something about you had, and if you don't remember, that's fine too, but you had said, um, you shared this story about somebody, a friend who had spoken to a dragon and asked the dragon, or why don't we see you, or something like that. And the dragon, no, sorry, I've got my story mixed up. But what is it about dragons? What can you share? Any message from dragons?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I know what your daughter is referencing.
Oh,
I
great.
do every once in a while on Instagram, I'll see what kind of a being wants to kind of do a Q&A with the community, and I just put the question box in the stories and people submit their questions. And so
Okay.
there's a whole thread. If you're interested in messages from dragons, there's a whole post about it. But this is the year of the dragon. This is
Yes.
I think it's like the wood dragon or whatever, but the
Yeah, it
whole
is.
overarching energy of this year and moving forward is dragon and
Yeah.
fire and earth. And it's a really intense energy. And so the dragons are actually trying to come forward now and call out their people. So there's like, all of us have our own unique guides. And a lot of us have dragons as guides. Now, many of us already know this and have a beautiful connection, but many of us are kind of just on the brink of opening that gateway. And so the dragon energy, like they want you to start paying attention if you're a dragon person. And so they're going to start coming to you in your dreams. They're going to come to you in the clouds. They're going to come to you in thought and energy. And they're really going to start introducing themselves to you. And so pay attention if all of a sudden you're obsessed with dragons, it's probably because you have a guide that's like, hey, we got to work together. The time is right now. So they're wonderful to work with. They are my favorite. They are one of my favorite beings. And so that's the message that they want me to share right now is like, we're coming for you and we want to connect because we've got a lot of stuff to do together.
You know, thank you for that. Thank you for that. There's two things I will say. Now, that was a question we did not talk about before going to record, right? It was going to be the reason I wanted to bring that question is because it was a special message from the dragons that I wanted you to share because, but yeah, so I'll come back to the dragons in a minute. I've just noticed your doggy on the couch there just started moving. How still was the doggy all this time when everything was happening? Look
Oh,
at
yeah,
that.
she was asleep the whole time. She's always there in almost every video I have of this
Wow.
room. That's her spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I just find my dog as well does this thing, but like even if we do meditations, I don't listen to them in the headset. I listen to them so that he can hear it as well. And he also gets into the meditative space, but isn't she awesome sitting there quietly like that?
Yeah,
So
she's so good.
I want to just say about the dragons now. I don't know if I know you checked out our channel, but we have been invoking dragons since about June last year on the channel, right? On the Great Awakening Generator and Light Language Messenger. So Light Language Messenger is my personal channel and it's my offering to the collective because I do light language. Um, and it's interesting you say that because we have brought dragons through so many different ones. And I've been using the guidance of Dinah Cooper's book called The Dragons, Your Celestial Guardians, right? And she talks about how the dragons, in the book, she talks about how the dragons had gone to sleep at the time of Atlantis, the fall of Atlantis, the last one. And They chose to stay on the earth and wait for us to awaken. And they have started their awakening as we were. Since 2012, they have started their awakening. So I just feel honored to the dragons and the fact that so many of them are coming through. Now, here's something that was very interesting. A couple of days ago, or I'll just say 4 days ago, I did a light language message, and in there was this dragon coming out of the oracle card deck. And it was a green dragon, and it was just like moving through the water. It was like forward motion, right? It was like it had a maiden sitting on its back, and they were moving, and the waters were rough, and it was like I could see the moving of this dragon in this card. Anyway, as I was doing the invocation of this dragon, because I kept going on about how the Chinese have kept the energy of the dragon alive, and the East has kept it on, and I've been doing it, kept it alive for so long, because we always see whenever you see any festival of the Chinese put up, you will find dragons, like a figurine of a dragon or people imitating the dragon and all that. Anyway, I was doing this light language the other day with the green dragon, and through that, I heard, and what about me? You keep talking about the Chinese, and okay, of course, this Chinese astrology, this year in Chinese astrology, it's the year of the wood dragon. What about me? And I was like, who's that? And I was like, okay, who's that? Who's that? And then it popped into my head. It's the Welsh dragon. It's the dragon that is on that flag. And 2 days ago, I had to bring the Welsh dragon to the forefront. And I was like, you can't be serious, man. I mean, seriously, it's like, wow. And I did it 2 days ago, but it was weird because it wasn't yesterday. Yesterday's one of them, a day or two ago, right? But it was interesting, this dragon. You know, I knew that I had to talk, that I'd missed the dragon, like prior to doing the recording. But the day that I did the recording, I only knew like half an hour before, this was it, and now you're going to tell the story. Such sense of humor.
Oh my goodness.
And you know what the sad thing about it is? It was a dragon that was acknowledged in 1485 because it was Henry VII that was doing some construction or whatever, or somebody. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't Henry VII. It was Henry VII that won the battle, some battle. But under this building, they were asked to dig up the dragon, and there was a red dragon and a white dragon. The red dragons represented the Celtic Britons, and the white dragon represented the Saxon Britons. And then after a while, the dragon was like on the flag. Some people acknowledged it. There's different versions of it or whatever, but it wasn't acknowledged again by the United Kingdom until 1959.
Wow.
And so you can imagine when this dragon, I'm not acknowledging this dragon, what am I saying? And so it just talked. It just said, hey, what about me? And I was like, who are you? Who have I missed? Why am I saying that the West has not had a dragon? Of course, it's had the Welsh dragon. I have to change my narrative.
Wow. Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And then I went and I looked up which countries have got dragons on their flags. And there are two other countries that I found. I mean, maybe there are more, and maybe Wikipedia is not giving us all because, hey, we question all the information we get these days. The one country is Bhutan, that's got a white dragon. And the other one is Malta. And it's interesting because the Maltese dragon is not standing out on the flag. It's got a red block on it, and it's a little logo that inside it's got the cross, and it's got a logo that says for gallantry around it. It's interestingly got the number 6 in Roman numerals on it, and it's got a rider on a horse, and the dragon sits under the rider on the horse.
Wow.
That's just like, you've got to really like increase the size of it to see where the dragon is.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to go down a rabbit hole with the researching dragons.
I know, and even for me now, I've been doing all these invocations. I've been bringing the galactic dragons in, okay, because dragons also have of different dimensions. We've got the dimensions, like we've got third and fourth dimensions, like the earth dragon, the air dragon, the water dragon, the fire dragon. We've got them here, and a lot of them have been sleeping on the planet, and awakening now, but we have got these fifth dimensional dragons and above, and we've got dragons that work with archangels. We've got dragons that come from different planets that are helping us with right now. And I think the assurance of this for me, like, that the unicorns have returned. They went away when Atlantis fell, but the unicorns, according to Diana's book, have returned. And I've got like three of them. And then there's one that turned up for the collective one day when I was doing an invocation. And so we've got all this help. And I guess the message at the end of the day is fear not, for we are taken care of. Sounding very biblical, but hey, fear not.
Yes, I agree. I agree. There's so many beings helping us right now, even if we just have no idea.
This is it. And, the concept has been on the planet fear and control, fear and dominate, fear and brainwash. And fear is the thing that has been the underlying concept for a long time. And we will be okay no matter what. So, I do talk a lot and I am sorry, but I had to share that when you were talking about the dragons, and I had to say, look, there's this dragon, it's come through now, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it like just said, what are you doing? You don't want to talk about me?
It's time we hear the dragons, all of them.
Yeah, and I have I did a meditation as well a couple of days ago. I got a new dragon because my personal dragon is Bilal, and he's like this sea green color, whatever, right? He's quite the joker. And you can tell my guides are jokers, right? I mean, they play tricks on me all the time, but they really love me. They're not nasty tricks or anything because they're not like that. But I got a dragon who's a black dragon. And the black dragon, I don't know, they mean something, and they're not meant to be frightened of. They mean something more than usual. And he just stood there almost like a man wearing a tuxedo, you know. But black dragons apparently have divine feminine energy and quiet, calm confidence, and said, well, now you're ready. And I'm here to take you through confidently the things you need to do. So,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
it was like, ride on me, get on my back, let's go.
Cool.
So,
Oh, that's
anyway,
amazing.
I have taken
Very
up so
cool.
much of your time, Kara.
Oh, it's a great conversation.
I know, I do love it. I do love it. I do love this. And, long may we have the connection to, well, I say long, but I mean, for as long as it is ordained, for as long as it is energetically what we're supposed to do, we will do that because, so it is. Anything else before you go?
I don't think so. I don't think
Wonderful.
so.
That's okay. We said so much, and we must keep some for another time. Other things will happen.
True.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. And Kara, thank you so much for giving us your time. I know that you have got so much going on, but I really honor you for giving us your time. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yes, indeed. So please remind us again where you can be contacted, and then we'll say goodbye afterwards.
Just reach out to me. Find my information on my website at deeprootconnections.com. That's probably the easiest.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time here on the Great Awakening Generator. Bye, everyone.